For those of you guys who don't know, Pete Freudenberger and Ralph Galati joined us today. When this idea first came up, this came up from Tim and the crew that's advising Joe, and they said, hey, we should do something while it's relevant. Not a month from now, but while it's relevant. So that's when we reached out to Pete and Ralph just only, 72 hours ago and said, hey, would you guys be willing to come out and talk to us? And so thank you guys for you guys being able, giving us your Friday afternoon to come do it. If you guys don't know, Pete Freudenberger, Army vet, and now mental health counselor, focusing just on veteran issues. So as we talked about, what do we need here today? Well, we could have brought in an OEF vet that had this experience, or somebody who spent 90 days on the ground, or somebody who spent 18 months on the ground in the Army, or as a special operations guy, or as an aviator. But we thought it would really be good to stay away from one specific experience in OEF and talk to two guys who can share some light on having been through something like this before. So Pete, Army vet, mental health counselor, focusing just on veterans issues. If you don't know Ralph's kind of a staple in the Philly veteran community. Came in the Air Force in '66, right? 70. And was flying sorties over Vietnam, got shot down, spent 14 months in a POW camp in Hanoi, and then came out. So when we talked about what do we want to talk about as veterans here in this space, maybe a guy who knows, or gal, but just people who know about mental health issues and dealing with emotions, dealing with the spate of emotions we have as we all try and process what it means for the government to withdraw, where so many of us have put so much time, and we know people have time. And then somebody else who has been through and has the lens of 50 years of experience to be able to look back and say, okay, here's what I experienced after I spent 400 and
405, but who's counting?
Yeah, 400 plus days in a POW camp to only come out and 2 years later have the United States withdraw from somewhere where Ralph left so much on the line. So we thought it'd be just between these two gentlemen, they thought they'd be able to share some insights on maybe what we're dealing with today and talk us a little bit through that. So I guess the first thing I'd say is I've been reading a lot of articles on LinkedIn, and it seems like we are, by and large, veterans are dealing with emotions on two scales. And this is designed to be an open forum, not a monologue from this end out, but an open dialogue. But it seems like veterans are dealing with processing two emotions based on two things. The first one is the sense of loss and the sense of frustration with what's it all for? What was it all for? We left so much there. I lost friends. Other people spent years there. Even Greencastle folks spent years there. What was it all for? And then the other thing is the sense of it's genuine American care and concern for what happens to the people that we fought so hard to help, and we made such progress. All that progress is for shit now, right? And maybe whether that's right or wrong, I think that's one of the things we're dealing with. Maybe, Pete, if you can talk a little bit to that.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've found interesting, and as you said, I'm a licensed clinical social worker working primarily with veterans and their families. It's kind of this talk about moral injury is kind of re-emerging for me, at least personally, and talking about exactly what you said, where you've gone, you've served, you've put yourself on the line to support this mission, and then to see it kind of fall apart. So yeah, this is a tough time. It's a tough time for me. It's a tough time for, I'm sure, a lot of you guys out there. And I think one of the things that we really need to be cognizant of, you guys are very, very fortunate to be at Greencastle. I think this is a fantastic organization that it provides a sounding board, it provides support, I think, for people that are here. You guys are in a very unique situation to have each other to kind of lean on. Most people out there don't have that right now. And those are the people, I think I've had multiple conversations here before we went on. Those are the people that I think we as counselors are really worried about, is trying to find, okay, how do we find those people and talk about some of the things that I'm sure Ralph probably experienced that back then we didn't have, there weren't as, I mean, there were there's tons of resources out there now. I think that's something that I want to make sure that I leave you guys with today, is that there are a lot of resources for a wide range of things that you might be feeling or impacting, if it's impacting with your kids and those kind of things. So we'll get into some of that stuff, I'm sure, further on, but yeah, it's
Ralph, is that an accurate comparison, or was I way off to say that maybe what we're feeling today is, as veterans, post 9/11 veterans, that it's something that you've experienced when you were coming out?
You guys are going to experience the same thing that we did in the 70s, which is combinations of guilt and anger and frustration. Military folks are used to a mission and understanding what it is and then driving to some completion. And the only advantage we had in the 70s was it took 2 years for what happened today to happen in a week. So, but we weren't so naive as to think that it wasn't going to happen. I mean, we knew that the Americans just didn't have their heart and soul into winning in Vietnam. They didn't, it was very politicized. Targeting and just about everything was from the White House as opposed to from the people in the field. So we kind of lived on a daily basis, especially the folks on the ground, of combat situations that didn't make any sense. We were flying combat missions in the air that we would go and bomb the same area every day. We crater the ground. The Vietnamese would fill in the hole. We'd go back in and crater the ground again the next day, and we'd do it every day. And then we'd be shot at every day. And it's like, who's even thinking of these missions? And it wasn't military, it was the civilian side. And we knew we weren't there to win. We weren't even sure why the hell we were there. And today you have the same issue between Iraq and Afghanistan, which is, why are we there? And now we're going to leave. And are we any better off than where we started? Hell, we got people we can't even get out of the country, for God's sakes.
So you're freed from the POW camp in 73, 74, full-scale war again, 75, we finally pull out of Vietnam. Was there a sense of like, and again, maybe this is something we in here in this room can relate to, was there a sense of, I put 14 months, 405 days of my time, I stayed loyal to this mission, only to have us pull out 2 years later? Was there a sense of anger and frustration?
Yeah, well, it was disappointment. Well, we never thought we were going to win anyway. I mean, it was... We never had anybody behind us. The nice thing today is, you guys should see it, is the American public could hate everything about the government and the military and Afghanistan and Iraq. They love you guys, which is really nice. They hated us in the 70s. I mean, we were toxic.
Pete.
I was telling Pete, we couldn't, the American Legion and the VFWs wouldn't let us in. So, very different era. But the politics are still what the politics are, but we had no expectation that our country thought that we were there to do something dramatic. I mean, it sounded good. You didn't want communism to overrun Southeast Asia, but our job was to serve our country, And if we fulfilled our mission, that's the best we could hope for. As a POW, we had the Code of Conduct, which many folks might be familiar with, military Code of Conduct. Our job was to fulfill the Code of Conduct and to return with honor and dignity. And we did that. We didn't have any expectation we were going to change the course of the war because we knew that wasn't going to happen. We weren't even sure we were going to come back to people that welcomed us home, for God's sakes. So, but as military people, we figured if we did our mission, we did our job, and we came home with at least personal dignity intact, that was the best that we could hope for. And that's kind of what we did.
Pete, is there lessons then from that we draw from that today?
Yeah, so Ralph and I were speaking a little bit beforehand, and one of the things that I said was I think we've evolved a little bit. Like, we don't have people spitting on returning service members in airports, and we don't have people just kind of insulting service members, which I think is a win. I mean, that's something that's kind of evolved over time. One of the topics before this even happened that was really big in my field is talking about the military-civilian divide and the fact that less than 1% of our population chooses to wear the uniform and serve. And I think what's going on now, I think, is further illuminating that military-civilian divide, and it falls on, unfortunately, all of us, I think, to kind of, I don't know what the solution is for that, but the fact that there is such a disparity between the people that are serving And then when stuff like this happens, you have less than 1% of the population bearing the heartache and the anxiety and depression on everything that's going on, and the rest of the country's like, well, finally, like we've been talking about. And I mean, I'm sure most people here wanted the conflict in Afghanistan to end, just not like this. Like, so it's.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
Personally, I appreciate everything you've done to serve your country. The commitment that you made, like Pete said, it's only 1%, and fulfilled it honorably. So, I thank you for that. The other thing, though, is you are really uniquely. This is not a paid political announcement. You are uniquely blessed to be here in this space at this time. When I see young vets or I get a chance to talk, we talk a little bit about transition and readjustment. I am not a clinician, so Pete is here also, aside from his intellectual capabilities, is to correct anything that I say that's so screwed up. But my feeling is the Department of Defense knows how to take civilians and train them to be killers. There's nobody's job to take you killers and make you civilians again. So that's why we have transition and readjustment issues. I'm being blatantly crude for effect. In a non-sexist way, one of the big issues is you lose that sense of brotherhood when you become civilians again. So just think back about the times that you had your buddies and your friends and your crewmates or whatever you had that were there with you every day through basic training and every day in the tank or on an air crew or wherever you happen to be. You knew you could rely on that person 100%. They had your back every single day. And now you become a civilian again, and where's that support structure? It just doesn't exist. I mean, hell, I can never relay this stuff to my family. I mean, I had really a lot of baggage. I had intimacy issues. I had all kind of crap. This is the most comfortable forum that I have. I find that I could talk to a veteran that I don't even know about stuff. Low, man. Well, that's okay. But you guys ought to really figure out a way, if you haven't already, to rely on each other. Just talking to somebody is better than not talking at all. So, the lifeblood in a POW camp was communications. Because I spent 2.5 months in either isolation or solitary, and that's not fun, especially when you are a asshole. So it's really hard to associate with somebody like that. And when I found that I wasn't alone, when some American was out there that was trying to communicate with me, that made the big difference. And so you have that structure available to you. I would make sure you exploit the hell out of each other. And if you have questions or something, fine. If not, I told John, I'm leaving my business cards here. If you have any time you just want to talk, or if you're not sure about veterans benefits, oh, by the way, if you're not in the VA system, don't tell me, because I will get violent. If you're not in the VA system, I don't care how much you hate it or not hate it, get into it. And if you don't know how, I'll show you how. Healthcare, disability benefits, education benefits, family benefits, you name it, there's plenty available to you. You have earned them all. Whatever you've earned, you better take advantage of. It's okay, you could actually nod your head, whether you believe it or not. So I'll make that offer available to everybody.
I'll follow up.
Please do.
I'm the asshole.
Yeah, right there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. That's to piggyback on what Ralph said. There are so many people out there. I've worked for the VA as well, and there are so many people out there that think this isn't for me, or I'm not hurt enough, or this is for my guys that I saw that had much more trauma or physical injury than I did. You have to. You earned it, like Ralph said. That's why the VA's there. There's been a lot of that over the years, and I would highly encourage you to investigate that, because there are so many things out there for you.
Let me go back just to focus on like what we're dealing with this week.
Yep.
and over the next couple weeks as we see. I think they said they put a couple thousand troops back in to help the civilians and the troops get back out. We started this off by saying, huge sense of loss of like, what the hell was it all for? But also, genuine care for the people that we, for those who deployed and for extended periods, you made relationships and you actually grew to like the village and the people in the village that you were working for, and you actually started to believe, even if culturally you're on opposite ends of the world, you start to, respect each other, and anybody who's ever sat down with tribal elders can appreciate that, right? There's a mutual respect, even if there's some suspicion on both sides. So Ralph mentioned talking to other vets. For those that are like, man, I'm not talking to some counselor. Like, fuck that. I'm gonna keep it to myself because nobody can relate to me as a mental health counselor. What do you say to that?
That's a really tough situation. I mean, I think I would talk about it as not necessarily a linear process. I think you need to find those people that you can talk to, whether it's people here at Greencastle or in your own environment, wherever you're at, family members, fellow service members that maybe you served with that you haven't talked to in a long time. Rekindle a relationship around that and see if you can feel some support there. That's a tough situation. I mean, there are a lot of veterans out there, and that's why a lot of organizations, Cone Veterans Network, Headstrong, Home and Healing, through I can't remember the name of the organization, but there's a lot of mental health organizations in this area that maybe it's not a full-on course of count. Like, they have vet centers as well. So the VA has vet centers locally. I would encourage people to, if you're having either invasive thoughts or it's impacting your family, impacting your work, you're drinking more than usual, you're taking risks that you wouldn't normally take. I mean, these are signs. Loss of sleep. You're not sleeping. You're agitated and much more angry than you normally are. Those are signs that there's something that you need to address. Whether it's, I used to use the broken arm analogy a lot. Like, if you snapped your arm right now, you'd be going to the orthopedist to get it fixed right now. You wouldn't walk around with your arms like, oh, I'll just deal with it. So, yeah, I mean, I encourage people to think of their mental health in the same way that the stuff that's going on. I mean, there are a few people that can. I mean, you talk about, okay, so let's whittle down the population. Well, less than 1% are serving, and then you think about even smaller population that have served or have. And we have an overrepresentation here, but that's a pretty small community. You don't have a whole lot of people to talk to. A lot of the mental health services out there, VA and otherwise, that purport to work with veterans do have expertise in this stuff. They've worked with a lot of people that have experienced some of the same things. So I would encourage that person to reconsider. I mean, I think that's the best thing that I could say is if you don't have friends, family, if you have no outlet and this stuff is negatively impacting you to the point where you're not satisfied with how your life's going, then I would highly suggest somebody reconsider that.
And if you don't like the VA and you don't want to deal with the VA, that's fine. There are plenty of community, civic-based nonprofits that are dying to help veterans. So if you're into art therapy, if you're into garden therapy, if you want a service dog, if you want equine therapy, well, you're military people. That's horses. Am I okay? I forgot. I know there's some Marines in here, and I promise not to use big words for you guys, but I apologize in advance.
Yeah, they're coloring with their crayons right now.
Yeah.
Or eating them.
Yeah. So, but there are plenty of outlets out there that some of them are pretty subtle, but sometimes all you need that. So let me tell you a personal anecdote. And so it took 30 years for me to actually acknowledge there were some PTSD issues. 30 years. So don't wait that long. And I got lucky that I was at a VA facility and somebody was looking through my records for another disability claim. And he said, oh, I see that you had POW in there. I says, yeah. And he talked about it. He says, I don't see any PTSD on your report. And I said, I'm okay. So that's the first clue. He said, I've got a psychiatrist right next door. He's got some time. Would you mind just talking to him for a couple of minutes?
Let me stop you if I could for 1 sec. I want you to dig a little deeper into that because I think, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I want you to talk to a professional. Like, can you talk a little bit when he suggests that, what's the stigma that comes with it, and how did you get past that? Because I feel like
I didn't feel like it wasn't a stigma. It's just my answer was what everybody else says. I'm okay.
Yeah.
And what I tell people is you can't go to combat and come back and be the same person you were. You might be okay, but you're not the same. And you better acknowledge that quickly. I mean, you can't watch people die. You can't watch your friends die and you can't be the same. I don't care who you are. I'm not sure clinically if that's true, but it makes sense to me. But anyway, I'm going through this with the psychiatrist, and he's asking me all these interesting questions for the first time in 30 years. And then now we're into an hour, and the guy says, look, I got to take a bathroom break. And I said, well, sure. I said, by the way, how am I doing? And he goes, you got issues. That was his medical opinion. You got issues. And he comes back, and then we're talking for a bit, and he asked these really intriguing questions. Never had it before. And he says, he was learning about your wife and how things going with your wife. And I told him, I was kind of aloof and I had some emotional, I had all kind of issues. Anyway, he diagnosed it. He says, you treat your wife, be careful how you use this. He says, you treat your wife like a North Vietnamese interrogator. I'm looking at him like, what does that mean? He says, well, when your wife starts to argue a bit, what do? He goes, whoom, just shut down. And I said, Jesus, where were you 30 years ago? Yeah. And it's amazing what a really good clinician might find out about you that you don't even have an idea that that's even an issue. You just felt I was okay, And so take care of yourself. That's really important. And if I ask you today how you're doing and you say okay, remember later on that you're not okay. Okay, and you might just need a little bit of fine tuning.
Pete, you had mentioned, and kind of piggybacking on that, you'd mentioned like if you're feeling, pissed off and dismayed and frustrated. I mean, we live in a world where the news is just bombards us. It's on our phones, it's in our watches, it's everywhere. We have, thankfully, 3 screens to surround us with it, right? One, I guess, talk about like what emotions are okay and what's not okay. And and that's probably a softball question, but like what's okay. And then the second part of that is you talked about, okay, if you don't want to call the VA, and even Ralph said, if you don't want to talk to VA, talk to somebody. So if you're a battle buddy on the receiving end of that, what do you do when somebody calls and says, hey man, I'm not about to eat my gun, but I'm really pissed off about what's going on? Like, just talk through, I guess, what emotions are okay, and then when you're on the receiving end of that call, how do you handle it?
So one of the things I wanted to say just on the top of that is this. So I've been on social media for a long time, and one of the posts that you're talking about the media, one of the posts that I posted relatively recently was one of the most well-received posts I've ever posted in my life, and it was, shut off the media, shut off your phone. This is a time to process how it's impacting you, not how it's impacting everybody else, or have it impact or kind of cloud the way you're thinking about this. So the two other parts, I think the emotions and how you're feeling and what's okay and what's not. A lot of that is internal and individual. It's hard to say, well, if you're here, then you need to do X. So there's some individuality to that, but things that you need to be, I explained some of the symptoms I think earlier that people should really be watching out for is when this is impacting your sleep, it's impacting your interpersonal relationships at work or socially, you're thinking about suicide. I know there's a lot of that right now. I think there's going to be a huge uptick in veteran suicides, and I think that's very unfortunate just because of this situation. But some of the things to think about around that is if these emotions are to the point where you're having problems controlling them, you can't shut them off. They're interacting with your daily activities. And I encourage people to think about guns in your house. Do you have guns in your house? If you do, where are they at? Are they secure? I mean, these are conversations that I have on a regular basis with people in session that, that's a hard thing. I used to sleep with a gun loaded underneath my pillow. That's just what I did. I didn't know any better. And when I had kids, I changed that. I changed what I did. But those things are things that you need to kind of think about and look at your own risk and say, hey, this is tolerable or it's not tolerable. And I think each of us have a little bit different frustration tolerance in what we can take. But knowing yourself and being able to kind of reflect, and you guys are all working in a place that I think is very systematic about what you do here. Like Greencastle, I'm sure there's a very prescribed, systematic plan to how you help your customers. And I think one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about since you asked me to do this was using some of that knowledge and some of that framework that you have for project management, and thinking about, okay, I'm the client. I'm not working for another client, but I'm the client in this situation, and what are the steps that I can take to get where I need to be on this, whether it's shutting off the news or locking up. I mean, and it could be all different levels of acuity. It could just be, I'm just pissed off all day and I want to run people off the road. That could be one person's manifestation of what's going on, versus I can't leave my house, my gun's on the table. And kind of fast forward to the other question that you had is dealing with somebody that might be in that situation. They call up, I'm done with this, I can't take it anymore. One of the things is to instill, I think, that's a really hard situation. I've been in that situation personally, just instilling hope, trying to redirect kind of that conversation, assessing like, hey, are you safe right now? What's happened? Like, if you know that there's a firearm involved, like I would try to, hey, walk somebody through, hey, take the clip out, like put the magazine here, like talk through if there's a very high volatile situation that you're in with somebody on the phone. That's needs to be your first goal, I guess, is to make that situation safe, where you can still continue to have that conversation with somebody and walk them through, hey, tell me what, and just listening. I mean, that's another big thing is,
I guess that's my question.
Yeah,
Is the less dire, not the I have a gun and I'm done with it, but hey man, I'm just super pissed off and I don't have an outlet for it.
Yeah, listening's a big thing. I mean, I think we underestimate the power of somebody listening to you. So I think just being a supportive friend, being willing to listen and sit with somebody's despair, I think is very powerful in being able to reflect and say, man, wow, that sounds really tough. And maybe sharing some way it's impacting you, and maybe it's allowing them to know, hey, I'm not alone in this. And I think that's a really important theme right now, is that you guys aren't alone. Like, each individually, you might feel like when you leave here, you go home and this stuff just kind of ruminates. It feels very lonely with this stuff, and finding that support system, whether it's through counseling or through support at Greencastle or through your employer or through employee assistance at a company. I mean, there's so many different layers of things that you could do, but I think listening is one of the biggest things, and listening and validating. Hey, it's legitimate that you feel like that. You should feel like that. That means you're human. It means you're not a robot. Like, enforcing that, hey, what you're feeling is human. It's not abnormal. You should be feeling like that because this is messed up. Like,
let me be in your face now. There are no excuses that I can think of that anybody says, I just don't know where to go for help. That's totally unacceptable. So I'll give you 4 right now. One of them is there's always the Veterans Crisis Line through the VA. That's an easy one. You could find that anytime you want. That's easy. There's a place called Stop Soldier Suicide, which is really good. They're a really good group of clinicians where they have case management where it might not be a suicide issue, but they'll get you somebody to get to help. There's places like the Cohen Clinic where Pete used to work, which is open to any veteran, regardless of discharge. So even if the VA won't see you, the Cohen Clinic will from a mental health standpoint. And if you come in there with your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your parents or somebody else, they'll treat the whole family.
caregiver, yeah.
They'll treat the whole family. And then there's me. I am a mile wide and an inch deep. Okay, so I know about a lot of things, but I don't know that much very deep. But I know I could get you to the right help, like with one phone call. So I'm not particularly empathetic. So as opposed to Pete, who will ask you all these really sincere questions, like, I almost don't give a shit. Just tell me what you need, and I'll get you an answer.
And I can do the same, yeah.
But I'll answer a few questions, like what I usually do, like, are you suicidal? You know, are you dangerous to your family or anybody? I mean, I could ask a few questions. Also, I tend to be somewhat in your face to family members and neighbors. So even though I have had this statement disputed in the past, probably by him, is I find it hard to believe if you're a parent, as an example, and you don't observe your child's change in behavior. And some people will say, well, it's pretty subtle. Sometimes you can't see all the chain. I said, that's bullshit. If you've got a son or daughter that's in their room all the time playing video games and drinking, you know, to me, that's a little bit aberrant behavior. Shame on you for not doing something. So I think there's the obvious ones. There might be a few subtleties, but there are plenty of places to go. And if you don't know where to go, you got 2 resources here that you could call us, and we'll be sure we get you some help. And it could be just minor. It could be tweaking, but it could be something festering also. So.
And it doesn't always have to be clinical. I mean, going back to how do you support one another, I think, honestly, I don't think this is the first time you guys should be talking about this. I mean, I think this might be something that you do right now, maybe as you can. I mean, I don't want to suggest any kind of interval or anything like that, but I mean, this is powerful to have this kind of stock of resources and perspectives to be able to bounce back off of one another and hey, I'm really struggling, and people can kind of surround and support those individuals how you can. So
now, some of you guys are relatively new to the non-military world, to the business world, and you will get to meet a lot of companies that call themselves veteran friendly. So you got to believe you are a true anomaly, where you are 100% military. And even the companies that say they're military friendly, I don't want to pick on anybody, but if you pressure me, I will. But there are some companies.
I know who you're talking about.
I'll get you to start drinking.
I already know.
Yeah.
I even need to hit the bar
We
yet.
can get you to start drinking. I'll come out.
There are some companies that make a big statement about hiring veterans, which is really good. They don't do a very good job of retaining veterans, which is really bad. So, but there are some companies that have veterans affinity groups, you know, that somebody comes in, they hire a veteran, got this readjustment transition issue where they barely figure out how they're going to fit because you don't speak the language, you don't understand me. And they've hired enough veterans where they have a little group where they come in and they do some mentoring and support. And that's really good. It's rare, but at least they do it. Here you've got an entire population of people that are ready to help you if you ask. So take full advantage of it. But you are really very, very unique in that regard.
So what we'll do is, so there's equine therapy. There's one right around the corner. It's like a mile from here in Malvern that they focus on veteran equine therapy. There's other resources. Obviously, I said Ralph's a staple here in the Philly area. If you guys don't know, he was the veteran, what is it, at St. Joe's?
Oh, we started Office of Veteran Services for a veteran entrepreneurship program.
The veteran entrepreneurship and the veteran service office at St. Joe's. So Ralph's been an advocate for veterans here in the Philly area for a long time. Grab one of his cards and don't be afraid to reach out. Same thing with Pete. But all those things that Ralph mentioned, all the resources, we'll put those out on a Teams message. So even if nobody here needs them, maybe you know somebody who needs one, or you get a call in the next week from somebody who needs one and says, hey man, I'm dealing with this, and you go, wow, what a great coincidence, because I just got these things from a friend of mine who came in, dropped in, and gave us these resources. So with that, I will thank you very much, Ralph,
bless you.
for coming out, brother.
My great pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, John.